He was standing at the kitchen island when I walked in, my laptop open in front of him, the screen facing me. He didn't say anything at first, just looked at me the way he always did when he'd already decided how the conversation was going to end. "Sit down," my father said. I didn't sit. I'd been sitting my whole life in that house. He turned the laptop toward me, my portfolio website, the one I'd built quietly over 4 years, the one I'd never shown them, the one that had, as of 11 days ago, a six-figure project listed under recent commissions. He'd found it. I didn't ask how. In our house, privacy was something other families had. "What is this?" he said. Not a question. I want to back up a little because none of this makes sense without understanding what dinner looked like in our house when I was growing up. My father is an orthodontist. My mother ran the administrative side of his practice for 20 years before she retired to run their social life with the same level of precision. We lived in Oakville, Ontario, in a house with a mudroom that was bigger than my first apartment. Everything in that house had a purpose, and so did every person in it. My brother was going to be a dentist. That was decided when he was 9. He's 5 years older than me, and by the time I was paying attention to how our family worked, he was already deep into a pre-dentistry track at Western, already coming home on holidays talking about clinical hours and board exams like a person who would absorb someone else's dreams so completely he'd forgotten it wasn't his own. I was going to be a doctor. Not a specific kind, just a doctor. A real one, my father would say, though he never explained what made his own profession less real. Medicine was the ceiling in our family. Everything else was decoration. I liked decoration. I'd been drawing since I was 4, painting since I was 7. By the time I was in high school, I was entering provincial competitions and occasionally winning them, which my parents attended and applauded, and then, on the drive home, called a nice hobby. The word hobby was deployed the way some people use a scalpel. Precise, a little cold, meant to cut something cleanly away. When I got into the Schulich School of Business with a plan to pivot eventually into something creative adjacent, my father said it wasn't pre-med, but it was acceptable. When I told him in my second year that I'd switched my focus entirely and was now pursuing a degree in design, he said I'd lost my mind. When I told him in my third year that I was also freelancing and making money doing it, he said that was the most irresponsible sentence he'd ever heard from someone with my potential. By my 4th year, I had stopped telling him things. I built the portfolio in the evenings and on weekends. I took on small contracts at first, local businesses, a few nonprofits, a restaurant in Hamilton that needed a full rebrand and paid me more than I'd expected. I was careful about what I posted and what I didn't. I kept it off my personal social media. I didn't mention it to my mother, who would have mentioned it to my father, who would have sat me down and explained, again, the difference between a career and a pastime. What I didn't know, for most of that time, was how quickly it was going to scale. I'd been approached in my final semester by a creative agency in Toronto, a mid-sized firm with a roster I recognized and work I genuinely admired. They wanted a full brand identity project for a new client of theirs, a tech company coming out of Waterloo that had just closed a significant funding round and needed to look the part. The timeline was aggressive. The fee was not. I signed the contract on a Tuesday. I told no one. I finished the project in 8 weeks. The client loved it. The agency loved it. They asked if I wanted to come on in a senior capacity, which I declined, but they sent me 2 more referrals, and then those clients sent me more. And somewhere in the middle of my graduation summer, I looked at my business account and had to read the number 3 times before I believed it. This is the part that is hard to explain to people who didn't grow up in a house like mine. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt something closer to exhausted relief. The way you feel when you've been holding your breath in someone else's home for so long that stepping outside into actual air feels almost painful. I had been waiting for permission my whole life, and then one day, I just stopped waiting. And the thing I built in the absence of permission had become something real. I came home for Thanksgiving that October. I hadn't planned to tell them anything. I was still enjoying the particular private satisfaction of knowing something they didn't. But my father had found the website. And now he was standing in his kitchen at 7 in the morning asking me what it was. "It's my work," I said. "This is what you've been doing instead of applying to grad programs." "I'm not going to grad school." He closed the laptop. That gesture, the deliberate, quiet click of it, was somehow worse than anything he could have said. "You're throwing away every opportunity we gave you," he said. "You know that." "I'm not throwing anything away. I'm doing the work I want to do, and I'm making money doing it." "Design," he said. The way people say a word they've tasted and found sour. My mother had come into the kitchen. She stood near the coffee maker and didn't say anything, which was her way of agreeing with him without technically taking a position. I tried to explain. I tried to show him the contracts, the clients, the actual numbers. He wouldn't look. He kept saying things like, what happens in 10 years, and you have no stability, and this is what people do when they don't believe in themselves enough to pursue something real. Each sentence landed with the same practiced precision as everything else in that house. He wasn't yelling. He was dismantling. And then he said the thing. If you're committed to this path, then you're not someone I can support. You can go build your little design career somewhere else. Get out. My mother set down her coffee mug. Dawn, she said. I mean it, my father said. He was looking at me, not her. You want to make your own choices? Make them. But not here, not under my roof. I want to be honest about what I felt in that moment. It wasn't devastation. It was something quieter and stranger, like watching a door that had always been locked swing open on its own. Fear and relief at exactly the same time, in equal measure, which is one of the more disorienting emotional experiences I can describe. I went upstairs and packed 2 bags. It took less than an hour. My whole real life, the one I'd been building on my own, didn't exist in that house. It existed in my laptop and my hard drives and my client relationships and my bank account. I had everything that mattered already. I called my friend Tatum from the driveway. She drove over from Mississauga and picked me up without asking a single question, which is the mark of a truly exceptional person. I sat in the passenger seat of her car with my 2 bags in the back and felt, for the first time in longer than I could remember, like I could actually breathe. I moved into a short-term rental in Toronto that afternoon, a 1-bedroom in Leslieville with high ceilings and south-facing windows and a kitchen that was smaller than my parents' mudroom. It was the best place I'd ever lived. I want to tell you that the next few months were easy, but that would be dishonest. I worked constantly, not from desperation. My finances were stable enough that I had time to be deliberate, but because the work itself was the thing that made sense when everything else felt uncertain. I took on projects I believed in. I turned down ones I didn't. I built a client list slowly and carefully, the way you build anything that's meant to last. About 8 months after I left, I got a referral that changed things. A colleague had passed my name to a woman who ran a holding company out of Vancouver, a private firm with interests in hospitality, real estate, and a handful of consumer brands. She wanted a creative director for a full-scale brand audit and redesign across 4 of her subsidiary companies. It was the largest engagement I'd been offered by a significant margin. The timeline was 12 months. The budget was, by any measure, extraordinary. We had 3 calls before she made an offer. On the 4th call, she asked me directly what I thought was wrong with how her brands were currently presenting, and I told her. All of it, without softening it. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Good. I've been waiting for someone who'd just say it." I signed that contract on a Wednesday in March, sitting alone at my kitchen table in Leslieville with a cup of tea that had gone cold. I called Tatum. I took a walk by the lake. I sat on a bench near Cherry Beach for a while and watched a container ship move slowly across the water and tried to understand how I was feeling. What I felt was this, that I had been right. Not in a way that needed to be performed for anyone. Not in a way that required witnesses. Just quietly, privately, completely right. The contract ran its full 12 months. The woman, her name was Petra, and she was one of the most demanding and most fair clients I have ever worked with, wrote me a referral letter afterward that I still have saved in 2 places. Her network opened doors I hadn't known to knock on. Within 18 months of that project closing, I had incorporated properly, had 2 contractors working under me, and had moved out of Leslieville into a place I owned. A condo in the Distillery District, which I purchased on a Tuesday afternoon and told no one about until the keys were in my hand. My parents didn't know any of this was happening. We had spoken twice since the morning in the kitchen. Both times were brief and surface level and felt like talking to someone through soundproofed glass. My mother would text occasionally, a link to an article, a photo of the dog, short messages that didn't acknowledge anything that had happened. My father didn't reach out at all. My brother called once, about a year after I left, to tell me I should consider apologizing. I thanked him for calling and ended the conversation. I had made my peace with it in the slow, unglamorous way that peace is usually made. Not in one decisive moment, but incrementally, through therapy and time and the consistent experience of building a life that didn't require their approval to function. And then, about 2 years after I left, my brother called again. This time his voice was different. He started with small talk. How are you? How's work? Have you been following the Leafs? I let him get through it. I'd learned by then to wait. I actually wanted to talk to you about something, he said eventually. Okay, I said. He told me that my father had been dealing with some business challenges. The practice had taken on a partner a few years back who had, it turned out, been managing the financial side in ways that were not entirely above board. There were accountants involved now, and lawyers, and the whole situation was, as my brother put it, really stressful for everyone. I listened. I didn't say anything yet. Dad was wondering, my brother said, if you'd be in a position to help out, like financially, just to stabilize things while it gets sorted. He said a number. It was not a small number. I was quiet for long enough that my brother said my name, checking if I was still there. I'm here, I said. I know it's a lot to ask, he said, but you're doing well. I mean, we can see that. And family is family. Family is family. I have thought about that phrase many times since that conversation. It is one of those sentences that sounds like it means something but is actually just the outline of a meaning, a frame with nothing inside it. Can I ask you something? I said. Yeah, of course. Why me? Dad has a practice. He has assets. He has colleagues he's known for 30 years. He has a son who is also a professional. Why is the call going to me? Silence. We thought you'd want to help, my brother said quietly. You thought I'd want to, I said. You're in a position to. I was. I was very much in a position to. I thought about my father standing in the kitchen with my laptop open in front of him. His voice measured and certain, telling me to get out. I thought about the word hobby, deployed like a scalpel over and over for years. I thought about the drive home from the provincial competition when I was 16, the careful, killing reasonableness of his explanation for why I needed to redirect my attention. I didn't feel anger exactly. I want to be precise about this because it matters. What I felt was something more like clarity, the kind that comes when a question you've been carrying for a long time finally answers itself. I'm not going to do that, I said. Not because I couldn't, not because I didn't care what happened to my family, but because I understood, in that moment, that writing that check would not be an act of love or reconciliation. It would be a transaction, the same kind of transaction our family had always run on, just with the power dynamic reversed. And I didn't want to be in that transaction anymore, on any side of it. I hope they get it sorted out, I said. I genuinely do, but that's not something I can be part of. My brother didn't say much after that. We ended the call politely. I sat for a while at my kitchen table, the same way I'd sat when I signed Petra's contract, with a cup of tea going cold in front of me. A few weeks later, my mother texted me, not about the situation, just a photo of the dog and a message that said, "Thinking of you." I looked at it for a long time. I wrote back a short message. I meant it. I don't think my parents are bad people. I think they built a framework for what a good life looked like and then tried, with real dedication, to impose it on the people they loved. I think they genuinely believed they were helping. I think my father, in particular, experienced my refusal to follow that framework as a kind of rejection, not of his plans, but of him. And I think that is genuinely sad, in the way that most family estrangements are sad. Which is to say, not dramatic or satisfying, just quiet and costly and permanent in ways no one fully planned for. But I also know this. The life I have built is mine, not in a defiant way, not as a statement directed at anyone, just factually mine, made from decisions I made and work I did, and a willingness to be uncomfortable for long enough that the discomfort eventually shaped itself into something solid. I had coffee with Tatum last week, at a place in Kensington Market she likes. We sat outside in the early fall light and she asked me how I was doing. The real version of the question. The way she always asks it. I told her I was good. She looked at me the way she has looked at me since we were 22. Steady and honest and without judgment. Yeah, she said. I know. I walked home along Queen Street afterward, past the places I used to walk past when I first moved to this city with 2 bags and a business that was only just becoming real. The light was the particular gold that only happens in September in Ontario, the kind that makes even parking lots look like something worth remembering. I stopped at the corner and stood there for a minute, for no specific reason, just because I felt like it. That's the part that's hard to explain to someone who grew up differently. The simple physical fact of standing somewhere because you want to, and not having to explain it to anyone. I stood there for a while. Then I walked home. There's something nobody tells you about the moment everything changes. It doesn't feel like a victory. It doesn't feel like the ending of anything. It just feels like a Tuesday morning, quiet and ordinary, with a cup of tea going cold on the table in front of you. When my father closed that laptop in the kitchen in Oakville, he thought he was closing a door on me. What he didn't know, what I hadn't told him, hadn't told anyone, was that I'd already been building something on the other side of it for years. That's the part I keep coming back to. Not the confrontation, not the bags I packed in under an hour, not even the first morning I woke up in a place that was entirely my own. What I keep coming back to is the years before any of that. The quiet, unglamorous accumulation of choices made in good faith, without an audience, without applause. I think about what it actually takes to build something real. Not the dramatic version, not the montage, not the single defining moment of courage, the actual thing. It's honesty, first. Honesty with yourself about what you want and what you're willing to do for it, even when being honest costs you something. I lied to my parents by omission for years, yes. But I was rigorously honest with myself, and I think that distinction mattered more than I understood at the time. Every contract I signed because I believed the work was worth doing. Every client I turned down because I knew it wasn't. That kind of integrity, doing the right thing by your own standards even when no one's watching, is what builds something that holds. Then there's the thinking part. The long, careful, unglamorous part that doesn't look like anything from the outside. I spent years learning, adjusting, reading the situation clearly, making decisions based on what was actually true rather than what I wished were true. When Petra asked me what was wrong with her brands, I could answer her honestly because I'd been paying attention, not just to the work, but to everything around it. The patterns, the gaps, the things people said, and the things they carefully didn't say. That kind of clear-eyed attention is a skill. You develop it by practicing it even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable. And then there's the part that is hardest to talk about without sounding either dramatic or falsely modest, the endurance of it, the staying power. The decision, made quietly and repeatedly over years, to keep going even when there was no external validation telling you it was worth it. My father wasn't going to give me that. My mother wasn't going to give me that. The only place it was ever going to come from was me. I don't think what happened to my family was karma in any mystical sense. I think it was consequence, the natural, logical result of the choices they made and the choices I made, playing out over time the way choices do. They built a family on conditional love, and when the conditions stopped being met, the structure revealed how little was holding it up. I built something on actual work, and when it was tested, it held. When my brother called asking for money, the answer was no. Not out of cruelty, not out of score settling, just because it was the honest answer. And I had learned, slowly and at some cost, that the honest answer was the only one I could actually live with. I walked home along Queen Street last week in that September light, past all the places that used to feel like the edge of something unknown. And they just felt like my neighborhood. Tatum had asked me how I was doing, the real version of the question, and I had said good, and I had meant it without qualification. That's what I want people to understand when they hear this story. The ending isn't the condo. The ending is the walk home. Being someone who can stand on a corner for no reason and not owe anyone an explanation for it. That's the whole thing. That's actually it.